Mr. Squidward, welcome to the night shift.
And a pleasant good evening, everybody. We apologize. We've had some technical problems right there again due to the nature of us trying to run our 31 Days of Hot Takes challenge and the live stream on the same computer. But of course, folks, it is another edition of the MI6 Sports Network's late night sports talk show. That, of course, folks, is The Night Shift on our 29th or 28th episode, I should say. 29th episode. It's one of those two. Episode 29 officially, folks, on this December 8th. 2020, as usual, folks, joined by our fellow late-night correspondent, Isaiah Leung from the home studios up there in Fremont, California. Yours truly, Callan McClurg from the home studios here in San Diego. Isaiah, as usual, man, we thank you for staying up late and for joining us tonight, man. How we doing?
Callan, I am doing fantastic, man. Coming into today, or this weekend, me and Steven were locked in a really tight battle in our fantasy football league, or MI6 fantasy football league. We were playing in a play-in game where the winner of that play-in game gets the final playoff spot in our league's fantasy football playoff, and it was a very, very close battle.
Sorry about that. Go on.
I started Nick Mullins, over Josh Allen because, I trusted Yahoo in the rankings, and, my team name is called Mullins Mania. So obviously for the final game, I just had to live and die on the hill of Nick Mullins. And ladies and gentlemen, I was so scared that I was going to lose because Nick Mullins, he only had 22 fantasy points last night. It wasn't like what he was projected to, but he still had only 22 points. Did have a late garbage time touchdown in that fourth quarter to Jordan Reed, which helped boosted his point total. So I was like, I believe a 54% chance to beat Steven entering today, but it was very, very close. I had a 36 point lead on him with Lamar Jackson and Baltimore defense playing. And dude, Lamar Jackson closed the gap big time on me. I think my lead was down to 1 point at the beginning of that fourth quarter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this game. I'm going to lose my chance to go to the playoffs. And it would take a miracle for me to somehow, some way win. And oh my gosh, the miracle came as Andy freaking Dalton drove the Cowboys down the field. They score a touchdown. And after they score a touchdown, I'm thinking in my mind, oh my gosh, like Lamar's going to get the football back. He only needs 6 yards to get 100 yards rushing, which would trigger an automatic 5-point bonus. For every time you get 100 yards, you get an extra 5 points. So that would mean I would definitely lose my lead. But I want to thank the fantasy football gods because it didn't happen, as Lamar Jackson only got 3 yards the rest of the way. Somehow, someway, only got 3 yards. And ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that I somehow, some way, survive and beat Stephen Wang 122 to 118 and advance to our fantasy football league's playoffs. And I'll be playing Trevor Williams in the first round this upcoming weekend. And ladies and gentlemen, we got to celebrate because that was a miraculous victory. There was so many times where I thought I was going to lose, where I somehow got off the mat and ended up surviving. So Stephen, good game, man. It was a great battle. But how about that win, man? That is Gen Z clutch right there, Callan. Woo! What a win.
Quick disclaimer, folks. Isaiah demanded that the playoff format be changed from 4 to 6 teams so he could get into the playoffs. He's number 6. So sadly, that's all null and void because he demanded that the league front office change it from 4 to 6. So really, not so much. We're not going to celebrate a fraudulent man getting into the postseason as a 6 seed when he demands that the league change the schedule format from 4 to 6 teams. So Isaiah, the celebration is null is a null and void, sadly, for you. But of course, folks, the night shift underway on this Tuesday, December the 8th, and again, our 29th episode of this program. As usual, everyone, we come your way here on Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday to recap all the big games, big plays, big news, and of course, the big scores of the day, and give you a Cliff Notes version of your sports day at 10 o'clock Pacific time every Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday, right here on the MI6 Sports Network. And as usual, folks, we do this, we have been doing this, I should say, for the start of majority of our programs. So now, folks, we enter the second half of our MI6 Sports Network 31 Days of Hot Takes Bracket Challenge. Again, we're now on the opposite side of our bracket. And again, folks, we're kicking off another slate of 8 first-round matchups coming up this week with, again, 8 more of those. And tonight, folks, you're voting for Isaiah or our buddy John Alcorn. Now, tonight, folks, it is Isaiah saying that Lonzo Ball is the 4th best point guard in the NBA and better than Kyrie Irving, up against John Alcorn, I believe his only appearance in the bracket challenge. And that, folks, was John having a rant about the Dallas Cowboys that was so loud that sadly it woke his mom, and we actually saw her pop up on screen during the course of the program. So it's either Isaiah saying that Lonzo's the 4th best point guard in the NBA, or John in his wide awake rant that you are voting for at this rate and at this point in time. So we'll do, as usual, folks, if you want to vote, again, visit facebook.com/MI6 Sports, and we'll again have your votes as the program does, in fact, go across the board. So again, you can cast your votes, folks, and we'll have those results for you as the show does, in fact, come to a close here tonight. But again, we thank you, folks, for being here. We'll get to some of the quick comments real quick. Of course, our good man, Shardul Gupta, writing in the night, and also Christy Wilson checks in as well. Of course, glad to have you two along for the time being right now. Also, Christy says, the Ravens beating the Cowboys. Sad face, or at least upset face emoji. 3 of them across the board. We'll have more about that game, folks, and as more time does go on. Folks, before we actually get into all the topics tonight, a quick reminder for you folks here about a couple of the scheduling announcements here that we have really, again, talked about a lot over the course of the past programs here. But again, we've been having not really a lot of issues, but just more so things to kind of polish up for you. Now, folks, as a reminder, coming up this Thursday for the second straight week, we're going to be having a special guest edition of Wild Sports, talking with myself, Isaiah, and John Mathis this upcoming Thursday at 5:30 in the evening. We'll be joined by 49ers reporter for SI, the man himself, Grant Cohn, will join us at 5:30 p.m. And also, folks, we're working on revealing one more guest later in the program that I think you folks will also enjoy as well. And then, folks, next Tuesday, back here on the MI6 Sports Network, we'll have our 2020-2021 Fantasy Basketball League draft shown live for you folks here at 5 o'clock in the evening to, again, much like we did during the fantasy football season and also, of course, during the NBA draft a couple of weeks ago, we'll bring you the live, raw reaction of the draft that, of course, is taking place for the Network Fantasy Hoops League. Again, that is next Tuesday at 5 o'clock Pacific time. And again, Grant Cohn, Niners writer and reporter for Sports Illustrated, will join the Wild Sports Talk team, myself, Isaiah, and John Mathis on Thursday. That is a 5:30 p.m. showtime back here on the MI6 Sports Network. With that in mind, folks, into week number 13 of the NFL season to wrap up the long slate of games on this Tuesday as the Cowboys and Ravens locked up and hooked up from M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland on a frigid cold Tuesday. Over in Baltimore, Maryland, the Ravens are able to hold on and win 34-17 over Dallas and all but knock the Cowboys out of contention for the NFC East division titles. The Cowboys now falter to 3-9 of the season, while the Ravens are now 7-5 and still hanging around in the AFC North division. More so, Isaiah, in this ball game, I have got to think, though, that this is a game that more so Baltimore came to play. Now, minus, of course, the rough start to the game, rough start for them in general, is that this was a game that I think the Ravens had to kind of get back on track, because I think that they looked good in spurts, but at the same time, though, against the teams, though, like I have said, Isaiah, when they have played the Chiefs or played Pittsburgh or other great ball clubs, they have sadly crumpled under the pressure. And I think that tonight, though, was more of a game where you saw a lot of guys step up and kind of help out on offense more so than anything else. I think, of course, we saw Hollywood Brown be involved in this game. We saw some great running back game, I should say, from Baltimore. And, of course, Lamar Jackson doing great on offense, and also with his passing game. Yes, he had an early mistake, though, but he kind of made up for that, though, as the game went on. Isaiah, overall reaction to this game as Baltimore wins 34-17 and again all but knocks Dallas out of contention for the NFC East Division Championship. In your mind, what do you got for us? Isaiah, you're muted.
Sorry about that, guys. I was fixing my computer just now and I left myself on mute. But, about this game, the Baltimore Ravens, they came to play and they exposed what, the Dallas Cowboys' weakness has been all year, and that is their defense. Their run defense is ranked 32nd in the entire NFL, worst in the league. And what did the Ravens do? They just ran the football down the Dallas Cowboys' throat. I mean, Lamar Jackson only had 107 yards passing with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Gus Edwards was fantastic running the football. He had 7 carries, 101 yards. Lamar Jackson himself, 13 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. That also includes that amazing 37-yard touchdown run on 4th and 2 from it was from the Dallas 37. He runs it in wide open. Nobody even like 5 yards of him. That's how pathetic the Cowboys defense was. And then Mark Ingram chipped in with 6 carries, 28 yards in this football game. This was just the Ravens doing what they do best and the Cowboys doing what they do worst, and that is not being able to contain the running game, and the Ravens running the football very efficiently in this football game. That's why the Baltimore Ravens won, because the Dallas Cowboys, they just couldn't stop another team's running game yet again. And this time it was sadly the Baltimore Ravens, who are one of the best teams in the NFL when it comes to running the football.
Most definitely. And I think this is a game, though, more so, I say, like we have said, though, that Baltimore had to kind of get themselves back on track, because we've seen them, like we've said, though, so many times, though, Isaiah, is they play great against, some of the bad teams. But how are you, though, against the, maybe the measuring stick games, the Chiefs, the Patriots for a bit there, and also, of course, with Pittsburgh running the roost right now in their division, is how would they stack up, though, against the ball club that is, at their level or better. And, of course, Dallas has, of course, had their own issues across the board this season, as we've already talked about, though, with defense, again, the quarterback situation, a lot of the offensive issues, Mike McCarthy today. But more so, Isaiah, in this game, though, for me, we know, of course, that Dallas has not played great on defense. We know, of course, they've not looking on offense. But, Isaiah, the kicking game went right down the drain for the Cowboys in this game. Greg the leg Zuerlein, Isaiah, not really the leg anymore, as Zuerlein misses not 1, not 2, 3 field goals in this ball game. One of them, of course, killed, though, by a penalty that was called on Dallas that, of course, sent Mike McCarthy into rage mode. But, Isaiah, forget the offense, forget the defense. How about Greg Zuerlein crumpling under the pressure tonight down there in Baltimore?
Yeah, I was really ticked off at Greg Zuerlein in this football game. Not because I wanted Dallas to win, because, Steven obviously had Baltimore's defense in fantasy football. So if Greg Zuerlein makes all 3 field goals, that is more points for me in terms of fantasy football. But enough with fantasy football. About the game itself, this Greg Zuerlein, I hate to say it because he was once a really great kicker, but I think that his best days are behind him. He has struggled mightily in Dallas this season. He missed 3 field goals tonight. That's not acceptable. You can't be missing 3 field goals in a game, because that's 9 points right there you left off the board. So you could have easily been, I know the score was 34-17, but, that was before the Ravens scored that touchdown to seal the deal. It could have easily been 37 or 27-23 and a much closer ball game. And then, who knows what happens if it's a close ball game down the stretch. So I think those field goals definitely cost the Dallas Cowboys. They might need to evaluate their kicking position moving forward, because I just don't think that Greg Zuerlein, who was a great kicker, he was a great kicker in his prime, he's not a great kicker anymore, and it showed tonight. You cannot be leaving those points on the board.
Yeah, more so, I think tonight was just more so a full, team loss for Dallas in my mind. Again, you're talking about, offensive plays not been there for majority of the years. We already know, of course, with the Dak Prescott injury, Andy Dalton being clobbered by the in Washington, Ben DiNucci coming in. Garrett Gilbert plays quarterback this year, and of course, Dalton comes back healthy. Of course, their defense has been Swiss cheesed across the board throughout the course of the season. But more so for me, though, in this game, I've got to roll with special teams because, as Isaiah said, though, you're talking about leaving 9 free points on the off the board and keeping them off the board because Greg Zuerlein is nowhere close on any of those kicks. And more so, I know that the weather, folks, probably was a big thing. And like I've said, though, a couple times, though, as well, everybody, is sometimes when you take a kicker who kicks indoors where the weather is not a factor, and you take them out of that, domed environment to a place like, for example, tonight, Baltimore, where it's cold, freezing cold, it's cold on the field. You have the wind chill factor as well, and you do have a bit of a breeze. They succumb to the pressure. And I think we could say that about teams playing in Green Bay, in Chicago, Foxborough, Baltimore, especially more so those 4 teams in my mind. But I do think, though, that mainly that's more, I think, in a way, sadly, a mental thing, though, with Greg Zuerlein, though. But however, I do have to put some of the blame, though, for at least the first missed field goal from Zuerlein on their special teams unit for jumping off or for false starting, because that right there basically crushed the first attempt of the field goal for Zuerlein. Then the next 2, though, I think were way too far out of his range. Because, like I've said, though, indoor kickers can only adapt, though, or they only look good, though, from certain yardage outside as opposed to inside. And again, I think more so that, especially, like I've said, though, for teams that play in domed environments, you have got to get some of these kickers closer, in my mind, than where you are, because their range, I think, is a bit restricted, I'd say, going from kicking indoors to kicking outside, especially around this time of the year, though, where, again, you're talking about snow, wind, cold temperatures and stuff of that caliber. I know, of course, that they're pros, though, but that there are, I think, some guys, though, that probably, do better in one environment than of course, another one. But as we usually say, though, of course, you have to battle those elements regardless. Some thoughts here at this rate. Not much really happening. Christy Wilson first writes in to say, simply put, though, fellas, the Ravens punched the Cowboys in the mouth. I think more so, I would say that, Christy, more so about the Jackson touchdown, where again he fakes the handoff and literally just has a wide open running lane for that 30+ yard touchdown. That more so for me was the really, I think, big talking point of this ball game. And also Christy writes in that the Cowboys defense was sad. And sadly, I think to go along those lines, Christy, they've been pretty miserable throughout the course of the season. And Shareable Steve writes in, the Ravens simply wanted it more than what Dallas did. And I think more so, like I've said, though, as well, to go to Steven's point, Isaiah, about this, is that Baltimore, I think, like I said, though, they needed the win more so than Dallas did because, again, Dallas is all but out of the running for the division title. But I think more so, Isaiah, the Ravens had to get it, though, for their psyche about that we played great, but now we have to, do it against a different ball club. But where do you stand, though, about Steven's thoughts that Baltimore wanted this more in his mind than Dallas did?
I agree with it because, the Ravens, they were coming off the loss to Pittsburgh, right? And then they lost, I believe, they lost to the Tennessee, it was the Tennessee Titans. They lost to the Tennessee Titans as well. So they were on a 2-game losing streak. Got people like me, John Alcorn, and others were questioning whether or not the Ravens were for real and if they were going to make the playoffs or not. And they needed this as a confidence booster. The Dallas Cowboys are a team right now that is struggling. I believe the record is, the Dallas Cowboys record right now is 3-9. So you have to beat these bad teams if you want to make the playoff. This is where you feast. It's on these bad teams. Those are easy wins for you on your schedule. So you got to take advantage of this. And that's what the Ravens did tonight. And, hopefully they can use this and going forward, they can keep beating these bad teams that are left on their schedule. Because if they want to have a chance to win or to make it to the playoffs, they got to beat these bad teams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have a team that's on that schedule that's not looking good, you got to beat those guys. And also, Steve says, congrats to Isaiah, or congrats to whining Isaiah for winning against me in fantasy football as he breaks up the cider. And I think Christy Wilson is right here as well, Isaiah. She thinks that Mike Nolan, the defensive coordinator for Dallas, is going to get fired because he flat out sucks. I think we've said that, though, for majority of the year, though, I think, Leung.
We have said it, but I think I heard this on CBS a couple of weeks ago, and that is Mike McCarthy is reportedly unwilling, or he's reluctant to fire Mike Nolan because Mike Nolan was the guy that gave him his start as a coach, and he was the guy that made him his offensive coordinator, that got McCarthy his head coaching job with the Green Bay Packers. So Mike McCarthy is really close to Mike Nolan. He's forever in debt to Mike Nolan for what he did for him. So it is going to be very, very hard to fire him. That's why, we've been saying on the air, you cannot hire your friends, because it goes to a point where you're sucking so badly, like the Cowboys defense are you really going to fire Mike Nolan, even though it's the right decision to do? But it's hard when it comes to feelings.
Christy also saying, I think that Jerry Jones will overrule McCarthy when it comes to Mike Nolan's job. I think so, because we know, Isaiah, Jerry Jones is probably the biggest micromanager in all of pro sports.
Yeah, I agree with you, Callan. But only problem is if Mike McCarthy tells Jerry Jones, I'm not willing to do it, then I think Mike McCarthy needs to get the heck out of the door as well, because there is no way you're going to keep it. I mean, he already made that mistake of hiring Mike Nolan, a guy who last time was a defensive coordinator was 2016, and his defense was ranked in the bottom tier of the entire NFL. Why would you hire the guy in the first place? He was never qualified for the job. He should have never been the Cowboys defensive coordinator. And if you're going to keep him one more year, good luck, Jerry Jones, and good luck, Mike McCarthy, because I guarantee you are going to suffer the same fate as this year as you will next season.
We'll see what the Cowboys do. But again, folks, the Ravens get back on track as they throttle the Dallas Cowboys at home, 34-17. Baltimore wins to close out the 13th week of the NFL season. With that, Isaiah, from pro football to college football is the newly unveiled college football playoff rankings came out, Isaiah. No surprise, man, no change in regards to the top four teams between Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and still Ohio State remains in the number 4 spot, though, despite a lot of things, though, Isaiah, concerning Ohio State's potential. Now we'll have more about that, but of course the game with Michigan is in fact off the board, though, due to the rise in COVID cases among the Wolverines. But again, Isaiah, no change, though, despite the top four, at least again, with Alabama still in control of that number 1 overall spot, followed up by Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State, at least for now, still in the top 4. But we'll see how that does in fact play out. Isaiah, any surprise with the top 4, but more so maybe teams catching your mind, or catching your eye, I should say, that are maybe on the outside looking in across the rest of the top 25 for college football?
I have no problem with the top 4 because nothing really happened to change the top 4 last weekend in college football. Alabama throttled LSU. They look like the best team right now in college football. Notre Dame won their game. Clemson handily took down Virginia Tech, and Ohio State, they didn't play, so I can't really punish a team. Or they played, but they played Michigan State and they manhandled them as well. So no change needed at the top 4. Texas A&M, they won their game as well. Florida, they beat Tennessee. So I think the top 6 is good. Iowa State is the one that really catches my eye, because I think they were, Callan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Iowa State was, I believe, either 10 or 11 in last week's rankings. And for them to beat West Virginia 42-6 and to jump up after that win from 11 all the way up to 7 and past teams like Cincinnati, who's unbeaten, Georgia, 2-loss team, you can argue that they have a better schedule and a better resume than Iowa State. And also Miami of Florida, who have only lost 1 game. I think that, even though I like it because I'm a huge fan of Brock Purdy, Iowa State's quarterback, that's really shocking to me that they moved Iowa State from 11 all the way to 7. But in terms of the all the other teams in the rankings, BYU, I got no problem with. They lost their game, so they have to move down. USC being at 15. I think if USC can continue playing the way that they are right now, which is dominating opponents, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if USC moves into the top 10 because they are playing right now like a top 10 team. Their offense is a juggernaut. Their defense is playing outstanding football right now. So don't be surprised if at the end of the season we see USC in the top 10.
We'll see what comes out of it, but of course, I think, Isaiah, that more so people still have their eyes very much fixated right now on that number 4 spot in the college football playoff rankings, and more so, as mentioned, it's been unchanged, folks, from the past week, as we've mentioned here with the Tide still at number 1, followed up by Notre Dame, Clemson, and also still Ohio State in the number 4 position right now in the college football playoff rankings as we near the end of the regular season. Some more thoughts, Isaiah. Dr. Ted Vicky disagrees with your thoughts about hiring friends. He says, I disagree. You can hire friends. I've hired dozens of them. Aren't you Callan's friend?
Dr. Ted Vicky. I know Dr. Ted Vicky is out here just trolling me right now. You can hire friends. I'm not saying you cannot hire friends, but hire friends if they're qualified for that position. Don't hire someone just because he's your friend. Make sure they're actually qualified for that position.
Valid response, but I think, though, that more so, I think that the issue with this, though, is I know, of course, that Nolan and McCarthy are going to be forever linked together because of the whole thing, but at the same time, when you have to kind of cut that cord, though, and you're a great friend, but right now you're just not qualified for that position. Ted Leiter actually spoke about that when I had met him about a year or so ago when he was in Philadelphia. He was doing TV work with his local station in Philadelphia, and his friend ended up becoming president of CBS Radio, and he said, you're gone, you're fired basically. But, believe me, you're a great friend, but you're the wrong guy in the wrong market. So I would kind of compare it to that, though, more so than anything else. And by the way, just kind of clarify, Isaiah didn't hire me. Stephen Wang hired me, not Isaiah. But I kind of catch the drift, though, of the doctor. So we'll see how things go at this rate. Now, of course, Isaiah, like I said, though, the very big spot, though, that has, of course, been very much closely looked at so far with the last 2 weeks of rankings, of course, has been the number 4 spot, still right now occupied by the Ohio State Buckeyes. But of course, Isaiah, the news coming out earlier on Tuesday morning involves the big-time rivalry game between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines, which, of course, Isaiah, for the first time, I think, ever, I want to say, in the rivalry history, that the Wolverines and Buckeyes will not play each other due to Michigan citing a huge number of COVID cases among the football program. Now, Isaiah, I totally get, though, that some Ohio State fans are probably thinking to themselves that Jim Harbaugh is doing this intentionally to keep the big bad rivals from Columbus out of the college football playoff. However, though, I do think, though, folks, that while people may have already drawn that line in the sand, I honestly don't know, though, if we really can go that route when we're talking about still though, a very, very sensitive situation that, of course, has not been helped, though, by, as I have said, though, plenty of times, though, on this network and other platforms, has been the main culprit, though, of more so the Big Ten Conference and the sheer incompetence of this conference not looking into the big picture. Again, trying to rush through the season and hope that no one has an outbreak of COVID-19 and playing this season, much like the Pac-12 is also doing, with no built-in bye weeks and no safety nets or no plan B, C, D, X, Y, and Z. No backup plans in my mind is what will, I think, in my mind, keep the Big Ten Conference out of this college football playoff, because as we also know, everybody, there is a minimum game threshold that schools must meet to play to at least qualify for the conference title game. And Ohio State, with this game being canceled, will be one game short of reaching that bowl or that game minimum this season. Now, of course, folks, I know that maybe the main talking point, though, probably amongst all Ohio State fans, and for that matter, probably Big Ten fans, though, that probably wanted to see Ohio State fall regardless, is that maybe that this was some gamesmanship. And we folks had talked about that kind of extensively here last week on Monday, Wednesday, maybe even on Tuesday. But throughout the course of our programming schedule last week, though, we had kind of talked, though, about there maybe being some gamesmanship. And we know, of course, that Jim Harbaugh has not been the best hire for Michigan football over the past several seasons. And we have seen that. But, of course, his record against the big schools that you have got to beat in rivalry games, Michigan State and, of course, Ohio State, is not very good. He's got obviously a 0 in that win column against Ohio State and has also struggled to beat Michigan State over the past several years, though. So more so people, I think it's probably a valid explanation or a valid reason that people have probably thought that maybe Harbaugh pulled the plug on this game for one, to save his skin from losing another blowout loss at the hands of Ohio State, or also maybe due to the fact of maybe job security, but also as well to kind of keep that rival out of the big dance, which of course Michigan has not been to over the course of the time that Harbaugh has been in Ann Arbor. But now, folks, for Ohio State's sake, this obviously leaves a sour taste in your mouth for the fact of the big bad rivals who you have simply dominated and owned over the past several years, with Harbaugh, without Harbaugh, basically, that you see this game get canceled, and now it is basically that you were stopped at the goal line by the big bad rivals, or at least in this case, Jim Harbaugh and his team. So, of course, Isaiah, a lot of moving parts here with this story, man. As I have said, though, to kind of pick up the pieces, while, of course, you were stuck with technical problems. As we know, though, man, obviously a lot of moving parts with this story. As mentioned, with Harbaugh perhaps pulling the plug just to kind of, not take the loss against Ohio State and keep his job safe in Ann Arbor. But more so on the other side, though, perhaps, though, there probably is a lot of news, though, or at least there is factual news behind that there is a major outbreak of COVID amongst the Wolverines football program. But Isaiah, we know, of course, that you're probably going bananas about not seeing Harbaugh get killed again by Ohio State. But more so, Isaiah, where do you stand more so about the cancellation? And maybe is this perhaps though still some gamesmanship, though, that this will leave Ohio State one game short of qualifying for the Big Ten title game?
I think that this is a little bit of both, because I think that there is a lot of COVID cases right now at the University of Michigan. Ward Manuel, the Michigan athletic director, actually came out and said today that they had, I think 30 players that were stricken with the coronavirus. But, Ohio State last week, I believe, they were missing 46 players against Michigan State due to the COVID issues, and they still played their game against Michigan State. So, I think it's a little bit of both. I think, yes, there is a lot of COVID cases right now in Michigan, but I think that they still could have played, and I think they chose not to play simply because that Harbaugh just didn't want to get his butt kicked yet again by Ohio State, because we know that in his entire six-year tenure there at Michigan, this, I believe, is Jim Harbaugh's worst team at Michigan. I know I went on the air last month and I said that, this is Jim Michigan. This is Jim Harbaugh's best team at Michigan. He finally has his quarterback. I know Callan keeps saying death, taxes, and Michigan losing Ohio State. Well, that curse is going to end this year. Michigan is beating Ohio State. They have a great offensive line. They have a great running game. The receivers finally have knowledge of that system. And Joe Milton, my oh my, was I impressed with this dude. This dude has a cannon of an arm. This guy runs like Lamar Jackson. He's like Lamar Jackson, but with a cannon of an arm. This guy is going to be great. Ohio State needs to be trembling right now because the Wolverines are on their way to the Big Ten championship.
Are you sure about that?
Listen, those words are going to live in infamy forever. But, This is not Jim Harbaugh's best team at Michigan. This is his worst team at the University of Michigan. This team would have given up, I believe, 80 points to Ohio State because that's how bad their defense is. Their defense could not stop any college football team right now in college football. Hey, they gave up 37 points to freaking Rutgers. Rutgers, who right now is one of the worst programs in college football. They have the worst offense. Go check the rankings. Rutgers is one of the worst offenses in college football, and Michigan still somehow, some way managed to give up 37 points to Rutgers. So if you're going to give up 37 points to Rutgers, you will damn sure be giving up at least 80 to 90 points to that Michigan offense. That's why Michigan didn't want to play this game. They didn't want to get their butts kicked. I know the COVID issues, there is COVID issues in Michigan, but they only have 30 players stricken with COVID. Ohio State played their game last week against Michigan State with 46 players out. I just think that this is Michigan not wanting to get manhandled and embarrassed by Ohio State.
You know, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, Isaiah. For one, I do, in fact, think that there is some type of a COVID outbreak amongst Michigan. I don't want to dispute that or get that twisted. There has been, folks, reports, though, of a very big increase or a very large number of that football program in at Michigan stricken by COVID. However, though, Isaiah, I do think, though, that there still is something behind this, though, other than just COVID, of more so of Jim Harbaugh just saying, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to go through another, game against Ohio State and to see my team get absolutely clobbered and shellacked by the Buckeyes and see Justin Fields run all over my program. So I think it's a combination of both, though. But I think more so, Isaiah, like I told the host, told everyone in the host chat tonight. And as Isaiah, I have said, though, over the past several weeks, and for that matter, the entire college football season, this, I still think, falls on the sheer incompetence and the rushed schedule decision by the Big Ten Conference for this very ill-advised season format for the Big Ten Conference. And I would even throw the Pac-12 in the same boat because they both are trying their best to speed through the season and hope that they get some luck and there's no COVID outbreaks. Isaiah, I think everyone knew that eventually every single conference was going to have some type of a COVID outbreak, whether it's the SEC or the WAC or the Mountain West Conference. There was going to be some type of a conference, and every conference out there was going to have to deal with a type or some type, in my mind, some type of a outbreak of COVID. And there had to be, plan A, B, and C, but also plan X, Y, Z, and plenty of ducks in the row and plenty of backup plans and backup stipulations and contingent plans to deal with the ever-changing influx of schedules being changed because of COVID outbreaks. And for the Big Ten Conference to rear their incompetence, as they did over the course of the offseason, Isaiah, still pisses me off to this day. And I'm not even that big of a Big Ten football fan or that big of a college football fan. I just watch it because it's on TV. But Isaiah, I still think that this really more so solely falls on the conference leadership for how they tried to, speed their, to pretty much sprint through the season and hope for some good luck with no type of a backup plan in place for these games. Because right now, Isaiah, like I told all the hosts tonight, man, they just screwed themselves out of a potential chance at a college football playoff game this year, in my mind.
Callan, I 100% agree with you. I think me and you have been on that same boat for a long time now. I agree. I think that the Big Ten completely messed everything up. My problem with the Big Ten is, it's their, the rules that they have, for COVID. Come on, man. Really? You really believe that going into this season that in 8 games, you have 8 games to play. You really believe that teams would be able to play 6 or more games? I never, ever, ever thought that was going to be the case. I thought that the most likely number of games that Big Ten teams would be playing would be 5 at most. And for you to put the rule that says that, oh, you have to play 6 games to be eligible for the conference championship game. I just think that's that's ludicrous. I think that's so pathetic, because we knew damn well that nobody was going to play that many games this year, because there was going to be outbreaks. It was just a matter of when, not if. So I think the Big Ten screwed up on that standpoint. And I also think, the Big Ten screwed up in the way that they're not letting teams schedule out of conference games, and I think that's what is gonna end up screwing Ohio State out of a potential playoff berth, is because they're only gonna play 5 games. And I talked to my guys Shree and Trevor, who are part of this network, about this. What if there's a situation where Florida beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, and then Clemson beats Notre Dame? Are you going to leave Alabama out? No, there's no way you're going to leave Alabama out, because right now they've looked like the best team in college football. So that moves to Florida. There's no way you're leaving Florida, because they just won the SEC. They beat Alabama, so you got to put Florida in. Clemson you got to put in, because they won the ACC, right? So it's going to come down to Ohio State and Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, their one loss would be to Clemson, and I'm assuming it's a close loss, versus Ohio State only playing 5 games. So that's going to be a very heated debate, and I really could see the committee putting Notre Dame in over a undefeated Ohio State team who's only played 5 games.
And I think you can say bravo to the Big Ten Conference for that right there, as is mentioned, with a 5-0 Ohio State team that, again, has to get to 6 games to qualify for their conference title game. This, I think, though, Isaiah, I still think, though, I think that Shareable Steve said it best, though, a while back, even though that we were disputing, that you and me were arguing about BYU getting in, is that I think, Isaiah, that more so that this season, I think just in a way, in my mind, is a way that I think people that are college football fans would say, why not, for this year only, Isaiah, expand the playoff field? Because as we also know, man, a lot of the filler bowl games that are going to be played from December 21st till about New Year's Day, a lot of them are going to be canceled, either because teams will opt out of playing those games or they're not going on. As we know here in San Diego, the Holiday Bowl has been canceled because of construction at the new stadium for San Diego State. But Isaiah, more so, at least for this year, much like we have seen other leagues, for example, baseball, 60-game season, regional play, the NBA, 72-game regular season, some rumors of the NHL going to a 56-game regular season, that there could have been a 1-year concession to say, you know what, we're not going to keep it at 4. For 1 year, we're going to make it 6 teams or 8 teams, or the top 10 make it, and to kind of fill more time, or maybe get rid of some of the bowl games, but more so added a bit more, expand the playoff field as a concession for the season, because as we know, not every team was going to meet all these other loopholes and all these other, check mark or check boxes to make it to the playoffs, in my mind, this season. But what do you think about that, and why?
Oh, I completely agree with you, Callan. I've been saying this from day one. They should have expanded the college football playoff this year, because now you're going to have teams like Ohio State that go 5-0, their best win being against Indiana. You're going to have Notre Dame, who only has 1 loss, which potentially will be to Clemson in the ACC championship game. You're going to have like USC. If they go undefeated, there's going to be fans that are arguing for USC to have a shot in the college football playoff. And, judging from their last 3-4 games, USC has looked really dominant the last 3-4 games. So you could give them a shot. I really believe that this was the year to expand the college football playoff, because, hey, if it works, great. But if it doesn't work, then fine. You can always just say, hey, it's 2020. Every sport is doing something different in 2020. Baseball having that expanded playoff, the NBA with the play-in games. Every sport is doing something different. You could always scrap it at the end of the day if it doesn't work. But I think that an 8-team or even a 6-team playoff would have been much better than this 4-team playoff that they currently have in place. Because at the end of the day, Callan, one team, I guarantee you, will be left out, and we will be like, why did they put in that team over that other team that got left out?
I mean, I get the whole thing about like the suspense of the Final Four, but especially I think in this season, though, as we have said, though, folks, so many times, I think more so in this segment here, about the potential chance of a Ohio State not making the playoff field because their conference has this, loophole in place. So they don't play 6 games. They can't qualify for the conference title game, or you have, one loss teams that make it or don't make it and stuff of that nature. Isaiah, plenty of thoughts, though, from our good man, Chris Wilson, joining us. He says, Isaiah, that Ohio State does not, in his mind, deserve to be in the college football playoff after being 5-0 with their best win being against Indiana. He also, Isaiah, wants to ask us a question. He is saying, Ohio State still has an over 70% chance of making the college football playoff, even after the Michigan game was canceled per ESPN. Does anyone care to explain? I think just more so, Isaiah, it's the fact that they are an unbeaten ball club. That's why they have that big chance of making the postseason. But what other factors probably come in or weigh in on your mind with this one?
Well, it's what you just listed, Callan. It's that they're the only undefeated team right now. Like if you look at all the other teams vying for that number 4 spot, they are the only undefeated team left. Texas A&M, they lost to Alabama. They lost 52-24. Florida, they lost to Texas A&M. Also, Iowa State, Brock Purdy and Iowa State, they lost to Louisiana Lafayette. They lost to Oklahoma State. So there's a lot of teams that are vying for that 4th spot, but they all have one loss. And right now, Ohio State is undefeated. But hey, we'll see moving forward. And also, like if that scenario where I listed, where Florida beats Alabama and then Clemson beats Notre Dame, there's also one question that we could be asking. Do you put Texas A&M in the playoffs over Ohio State? Because that Texas A&M, yeah, I know Florida won the SEC, but Texas A&M, they beat Florida. So there's going to be a lot of questions if that scenario does end up happening.
Isaiah, I want to respond to your thoughts about A&M. I agree, especially if they finish 5th in the final rankings and Ohio State remains ahead of them. If they say no to Ohio State, I say go next in line, and hey, A&M's right there at number 5.
Yeah, I agree with you, but Callan, it's going to be hard though, because I don't think you would leave out Florida, right? Who beat Georgia, they would have beaten Alabama in the SEC championship game, who everybody right now is calling the best team in college football. So there's going to be a lot of debate if Florida ends up pulling the upset. That is like the situation that's going to throw this whole thing into chaos.
And I think, though, just adds like some more drama and some more anticipation for those final rankings. Chris also writes in the playoff field could have easily been expanded. Again, Chris, a 1-year concession just for this year, right here and right now. 8 teams make it, 10 teams make it, 6 teams make it, but they still kept it at 4. Chris, to your point, yes, the NHL is looking at a January 13th start date with a 52 or 56 game season pending CBA financial resolutions on salary deferment. And also, Isaiah, we'll go back to you. What do you got for us?
Callan, speaking of the college football playoff, there's one team that right now, besides Ohio State and Coastal Carolina, that is undefeated, and I think they warrant some consideration for the college football playoff, and that is the New Mexico State Aggies. Why not we put them into the college football playoffs? I mean, right now they haven't played a game yet, but they still got 0 losses.
I thought you were going to say a different program that is unbeaten in their conference, and you had the state part right, but I was very concerned about what that other word was going to, or those words were going to be. And also, Chris says, what about Coastal Carolina? They're 10-0. They probably had their biggest win in program history over BYU last Saturday.
I mean, they're a good story, but unfortunately, with how the committee has been putting teams into the playoffs recently, I highly doubt it. Because if the committee would have put UCF into the playoffs, then I could say there is a chance. But when UCF was having their run I believe it was like 3 years ago, the committee didn't really judge them that well. They always won, but they would always keep them at like number 10 or number 13 or 14 or somewhere in that range.
Sadly, Chris, like I've told or try to tell Isaiah, Chris, Coastal Carolina can join BYU and Cincinnati. The three best stories of the season, but they're not going to sniff the college football playoff, sadly, at this rate. James Gonzalez, fresh out of work, says, hello, everyone. And really, Isaiah, New Mexico State?
They're undefeated. I mean, why not? If we're talking about shaking things up, let's shake them and put them in. A team that hasn't been to a bowl game in over 50 years.
No, because they still have a 0 in the win column too, and sadly, kind of need to win games to get into the actually get up the rankings. With that, Isaiah, staying in college football, some more news involving your beloved Wolverines, and that, of course, is some news involving your boy Jim Harbaugh. What do you got for us?
Well, like we reported last night, Michigan has offered Jim Harbaugh, believe it or not, a contract extension, a multi-year contract extension that I believe would keep him in Ann Arbor through 2025. But also, guys, there's a very interesting nugget in this extension news, and that is Michigan is going to pay him like a lower salary than they currently are paying him, but it will have higher incentives. So he'll get more money if he beats Ohio State. He'll get more money if he beats Penn State. He'll get more money if they win the Big Ten. He'll get more money if they go to the college football playoff and even win the national title. So that's the extension that they're discussing right now. Apparently the extent or the offer is in Jim Harbaugh's court, but Jim Harbaugh right now has his eyes on the NFL, and right now rumors are saying that there are at least 5 teams, yes, 5 teams that are interested in Jim Harbaugh for their potential head coaching vacancies, and one of the teams actually that I've seen on Twitter is Callan's Chicago Bears.
Isaiah, I will say this about Jim Harbaugh is sadly, he is not the same coach he once was back with the 49ers or maybe other programs. And it's only gotten worse, though, because you go to Michigan, and of course, you're going to a very great program known for tradition and winning and excellence. But it's been far away from the glory days of Michigan. I just don't see, Isaiah, how the school can even offer this guy a contract with how woefully bad his tenure has been with Big Blue. I mean, believe me, Michigan, as I said, is a very great program. But honestly, the school would be stupid to offer a coach who has been there over 6 years at least and has not delivered a victory over the biggest rivals in Ohio State. Can't beat the crosstown or in-state rivals in Michigan State, and has not gotten to a playoff game or a big-time bowl game in his time at Michigan. It's a risk that you absolutely, in my mind, if you are in Ann Arbor, this is a financial risk you absolutely cannot afford to take, because you have seen this program, a once proud Wolverine football program, go right down the drain and right into the gutter with how it's been so far with Harbaugh's time. I just don't see, though. I get about the incentives, Isaiah, if he beats Sparty or beats the Buckeyes. But at the rate it's been going, it's not going to happen like anytime soon. And again, they can't afford to do this. But I think more so, Isaiah, I think that you're right, though. I'm sure you're going to add on, though. But I think that you're right, though. It's more of a thing, though, where Harbaugh would leave the program on his own terms probably and go to the NFL before he probably, in my mind, goes back and finds a job somewhere in college.
Callan, I wrote this in the MI6 Sports Network group chat that we have today. And I was saying, I think Michigan, they watch our shows because they know when to tick me off. I mean, my gosh, like yesterday night as we were ending Wild Sports Talk, this news breaks. And then today there's more news coming out that they've not only discussed it, but some sources were even saying that they were close to finalizing that agreement. Like Michigan, I swear Michigan is really trying to tick me off with this news. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Jim Harbaugh, what has he done this year? Forget the last 5 years. What has he done this year? They've only won 2 games this season. I believe right now they're 2-5. They just lost to a winless Penn State team, a team that lost to Indiana, lost to Ohio State, lost to Nebraska as well, and they were 0-5. And Michigan, they gave up a bunch of points to that struggling Penn State offense, and they lost to that winless Penn State team. Michigan has been going downhill this entire season. Their quarterback play, we don't know who's their starting quarterback because they keep rotating them like Jeremy Pruitt is doing in Tennessee. Their defense is atrocious. I guarantee you me and Callan could score touchdowns on that Michigan defense because that's how bad they are. Offensive line, they're getting pushed around. The running backs suck. Their wide receivers can't get separation. I mean, everything is just broken with this Michigan program. And if you offer this guy a contract extension, what do you think he will do for you? I mean, recruiting's not even going any well for you. So with recruiting not going any well for you, are you really expecting this guy, Jim Harbaugh, to turn it around with better coordinators? I mean, Michigan's already changed coordinators 2 times in 6 years under Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh's given up play calling duties. Harbaugh even got a director of recruiting to help him recruit. You've tried everything. It's time to cut the cord and move on from Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, he did great with Stanford, with the 49ers. But I think, like Grant Cole, our guest on Thursday, said on one of his videos a couple months ago, Jim Harbaugh's best days as a head coach are behind him. Teams have figured him out. The offense that he likes to run, that he ran with Michigan early on in his tenure, the offense that he ran with the 49ers, that he loves to run, it's a run-heavy, smash-mouth offense. That offense is extremely outdated. You can't win with that offense anymore. So Jim Harbaugh needs to go. If they sign Jim Harbaugh to an extension, that just tells me that Warren Manuel and the Michigan administrators, they don't care about winning. They just care about the money, and they just care about they care about mediocrity. That's what they care about. Because if you don't move on from Jim Harbaugh, I don't see the program getting any better under his watch.
You know, Isaiah, you bring up 5 different NFL teams being in the running and Chicago being one of them. And I do think, though, that if the Bears, I don't think the Bears would take the gamble on Harbaugh. But I think hypothetically, if the Bears did, this may sound preposterous, but it might work in my mind with his offense, especially if Chicago gets Tariq Cohen back healthy next season, because, of course, Cohen has been out basically all year with the ACL injury he suffered early in the season. And if you were to have Harbaugh with Cohen and Montgomery and Cordero Patterson as your 3 running backs, that may perhaps work. Now, again, of course, quarterback remains an issue, but, of course, Chicago, maybe not. I don't see it happening with, of course, how Jim has been during his time in Michigan. But I think, though, if Tariq Cohen comes back healthy, that might be a little bit of a small, intriguing storyline. It's more of a sidebar for me. I'd rather have a more established, better name. I'm not really established, but more so maybe someone who, again, has been right now maybe down on the college level or somewhere else internally in the NFL. But we'll see, though, how things do go. Isaiah, back over to you. What do you got?
Callan, I agree with you that Tariq Cohen coming back could be an intriguing storyline. But what has been Jim Harbaugh's problem at Michigan? It's the fact that he can't develop a quarterback. And Chicago has no quarterbacks right now on its roster. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky, he's probably going to be out of there in the offseason. Nick Foles, I don't think he's the answer long-term for the Chicago Bears. The Bears need to find themselves a franchise quarterback, and they need to find a coach who can develop that quarterback. And I don't think that Jim Harbaugh is the guy that can do both of those things for the Chicago Bears. I think for Jim Harbaugh, I think his best landing spot, honestly, would be either to the Atlanta Falcons, because they have Matt Ryan, and also maybe Houston with Deshaun Watson. He needs to go to a place with an established veteran quarterback, because if you look at his track record in San Francisco, that has always been Harbaugh's, or what Harbaugh has had success with, and that is established veteran quarterback. Look at Alex Smith. Look at Colin Kaepernick. Harbaugh needs to go to either Atlanta or the Texans, or maybe even, like, if I'm just spitballing off the top of my head, I would say, I'm trying to think about some of the teams that might open. I would say Detroit as well.
I was going to just Detroit myself.
Yeah, I think Detroit also should consider Jim Harbaugh because they have Matthew Stafford and they've got a very talented group of wide receivers with Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. So I think that Harbaugh could have success in Detroit.
Yeah, I do too. I think more so Atlanta, Houston, Detroit, Chicago's more so maybe like the bottom of my list, but I would not. I mean, I don't know how I'd feel about it more so if the Bears actually have a competent quarterback, but I think that more so that Harbaugh maybe staying in Michigan just does not, to me, sound like a great idea. Plenty of thoughts, Isaiah. Chris Wilson writes in saying, wah, ha, 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 hashtag why extend Harbaugh instead of hashtag fire Harbaugh. Christy Wilson agrees Jim Harbaugh would be crazy to accept this contract extension. Shareable Stephen behind the scenes writes in, worst news ever for Michigan fans. Michigan fans should be thankful that OSU versus Michigan got canceled. And yes, Christy agrees that one of the top 5 teams for Harbaugh would be Chicago. Chris agrees. These are not the Lloyd Carr days. Laughing face emoji. James Gonzalez, how bad and desperate Michigan must be to keep Jim? How do you even try to give someone an extension to someone for doing a bad job in the first place? Chris also adds on, Penn State had to get a win against someone and somewhere. Ha, ha, ha. Again, they had to just get that win, and they happened to come against the Wolverines in Ann Arbor nonetheless. James also says, or actually Chris says first, you can win with the smash mouth style, ask the Badgers in Irish. Harbaugh just can't recruit the guys he needs because he's losing out to better programs. Very valid point, though, that more so guys may be looking to Ohio State, Sparty, Wisconsin, teams like that. And also, James says, usually you give an extension to someone who does even a serviceable job, but it isn't enough right now with Harbaugh at this rate. Christy, yes, that is true. The Bears not had a decent quarterback since Jim McMahon in 85. What about Sexy Rex, baby? 2006, we go to the Super Bowl and lose to Indianapolis. Those are the last years that the Bears had a very decent quarterback. Also, Chris Wilson agrees that my co-host Craig would toss a table if the Lions hired Jim Harbaugh, laughing out loud. And Chardol and Chris are back on the Fire Harbaugh hashtag wagon. Love to see it, fellas, from you guys right there. Now, with that, Isaiah, a very interesting note, though, that we did, in fact, talk about off the air, you and me did earlier in the day, though, and that is a very loony story from Knoxville, and the circus that is the Tennessee Volunteers football program. During Jeremy Pruitt's press conference, Isaiah, news comes down of one of his, gazillion quarterbacks opts out of the season during Coach Pruitt's press conference to the media on Tuesday. I think, Isaiah, sadly, that just shows you the current state right now of volunteer football in Knoxville.
Callan, I mean, thank God for Tennessee football being bad because they saved Michigan football from being the laughing stock of college football. But, Callan, actually, it wasn't the quarterback. It was actually the kicker who quit.
That's even worse.
The starting kicker quits in the middle of Jeremy Pruitt, or he opts out in the middle of Jeremy Pruitt's press conference, not even like telling his head coach.
Wow.
He doesn't even tell his head coach that he's opting out. Instead, he posts it on social media. So one of the media members finds it on his Twitter, and then he just tells Coach Pruitt, who just gets blindsided by it as he's doing his press conference. I mean, it just shows you the current state of Tennessee football. Tennessee football right now is a laughing stock. Jeremy Pruitt needs to be fired because this guy, I don't think he's not a good head coach. He's more of defensive coordinator material. Like we said, I believe it was on Saturday's edition of the Night Shift, you cannot be shuffling your quarterbacks in and out like he's been doing the last 6 games at Tennessee. This is what happened. One quarterback will start the game, he would play the first half, and then if he makes a mistake, if he makes a mistake, then he would get benched. Second half, some other quarterback comes in, and then the next game, that guy would start the game. He would make a mistake, and then the other guy that got benched in the last game, he comes in. You just can't be shuffling your quarterbacks out like that if you want your quarterbacks to have any success. And I believe that's biggest reason why Tennessee football is where they are right now. Their defense is not that bad, actually. It's their offense that has been one of the worst offenses in the SEC behind Vanderbilt. They just haven't had a competent quarterback at the helm in the last 7 years there at Tennessee. So Tennessee, until they figure out the quarterback position, they're not going to be going anywhere either under Pruitt or under their new head coach.
So not just it's not a quarterback, folks. It's the kicker who opts out of the season in the middle of Jeremy Pruitt's media availability with the local Knoxville media. And again, just another layer on this circus that is Tennessee volunteer football. Chris Wilson with the absolutely best comment of this segment. So are they the unvolunteers now? Laughing out loud. Also, James says that Tennessee football has been garbage for a long time. James also says, the kicker? I can't. And also, Christy says Tennessee has been irrelevant ever since Peyton Manning left for the NFL in '98, in her opinion. Like I said, though, Isaiah, Tennessee, Connecticut, and Kansas, to me, they're not football schools because they're known for basketball. That's what I always tell people when I say, yeah, I root for the Vols or I root for the Huskies or the Jayhawks. They're like, you know that their football programs suck. I'm like, I don't care about their football programs. It's all about basketball. They don't care about it. Neither do I.
Well, Callan, I really wish that we could have had set up a camera inside the Tennessee locker room when that happened, because, I mean, that would have made for such a great blooper of the week. Imagine the coaches doing the press conference in one room and the kicker just grabs all of his stuff and quits in the middle of the coach's press conference. I mean, my God, that would have been a great blooper of the week.
That just sadly adds another, not sadly, but adds another chapter to this, bizarre year that has been 2020. With that, Isaiah, one more coach, perhaps entertaining offers, but not at the college level, at the pro level, is Matt Campbell of Iowa State. Of course, Isaiah Campbell leading the Cyclones to their first regular season conference title since 1912, nonetheless, nearly 100 years in the making. And of course, he has said no thanks to college, but interested in eyeing jobs at the NFL level. I should say not interested in Michigan's job, but is more so eyeing NFL jobs. Isaiah, this, I think, though, maybe becomes one, though, where a franchise may have to, offer or lure Coach Campbell with just more than just head coaching duties in my mind. But what do you think about this story and why?
First of all, I feel really bad for Michigan because this guy was the hottest. He was the hottest commodity on the coaching market. So if he's truly not interested in the Michigan job, then that is a huge loss for Michigan because this guy can coach football. I mean, look what he's done with Iowa State. Iowa State, they were irrelevant until he got to Iowa State, and he's found a quarterback in Brock Purdy. He's developed him. Brock Purdy, I believe, was a 3-star recruit before he got to Iowa State. He goes to Iowa State, and all of a sudden they start having success like they've never seen before down there in Ames, Iowa. So this guy can coach football. He's a fantastic coach. And if I were him, I would honestly entertain the NFL more than college football because you've had success in college football at Iowa State. Like, I know people are going to be like, oh, Isaiah, but he's done it at a small school at Iowa State. Let's see what he can do when he can get top 5 recruits or 5-star recruits at a program like Michigan or Texas. I think the NFL would be a better challenge for him because you can see what he does on the highest levels of football. So for me, I would go with the NFL. I think that, if that's like a dream of his to coach in the NFL, do it. And also he can challenge himself to see what he can truly do in the NFL, because I think he would have success in the NFL because this guy's a great developer of quarterbacks. This guy is a culture changer. This guy's a great play caller on offense. You look at some of the plays that Iowa State runs on offense. They are just like NFL offenses. So I think he will have lots of success in the NFL. And I think that, Callan, I really think your Bears should go after him because this guy has shown that he can develop quarterbacks, and that's what your Bears need.
Most definitely. And again, we'll see, though, what really comes out of it because, about Trubisky maybe, the Bears may not be firing Nagy and Ryan Pace right away. It may be more so in the next season because of the revenue being lost and, the pandemic going on. But I do, though, think that I like Matt Campbell's attitude, and more so just, I'm not interested in Michigan or college. I want that other big challenge. I want to go to the NFL. I kind of like that mindset that this guy has got. I know, of course, he's coming off of the first, regular season Big 12 title or a championship in regular season play for Iowa State in close to 100 years and stuff like that. But I think, though, that probably it becomes more, I think, sadly, Isaiah, it's just one of those things that it boils down more so to money. And also, is there going to be more involved in just, head coaching duties in my mind for Matt Campbell if he goes to the NFL? Isaiah, what do you got on this one?
I think that if a team tries to lure Matt Campbell, like an NFL team tries to lure him, because he's been one of the top coaching, or he's been one of the top up-and-coming coaches for a long time, and he's been a guy that the NFL has had on their radar, and they've tried to get him in the past. I remember the Jets tried to get him last year or the year before last year, but I think one of the stipulations that Matt Campbell, the head coach of Iowa State, will ask for is, if you hire me, you might have to get me Brock Purdy, because that's a guy that I'm very, very familiar with, having coached him at Iowa State, and he's a guy right now that's projected to go either the second or third round in the NFL draft. So I think Purdy and Campbell could be like a package deal for a franchise in the NFL.
We'll see if that actually works out, though, and if a franchise would be willing to actually go that route. A couple of thoughts about this, Isaiah. Chris Wilson writes in to say, Michigan should just be single and take a year off. Yeah, maybe. We'll see what happens. And more so, James says, I would hope, though, that Matt Campbell stays at Iowa State and build on his success even more. I would think it would be that way, but it would have to be a very, I think, lucrative move by a club to lure this guy out of coaching at the college level to bring him to the pros. Or again, it's maybe like Isaiah said, it's got to be a quarterback and head coach package deal where, again, I'll take the job, but you have to promise me that you draft my quarterback out of Iowa State. Perhaps, Isaiah, back over to you.
Callan, I got a question for you. If you're Matt Campbell, right, and last time the Jets, they tried to get you, they were negotiating with you, but, the negotiations fell through because of, the Jets wanting to put their own assistants on Matt Campbell's staff and not letting Campbell pick his own coaching staff. So if you're Matt Campbell, right, and the Jets right now, they're going to have a head coaching vacancy, and if the Jets fire their GM as well, if they offer you like the head coaching job, right, will you take the Jets head coaching job after what happened last time around, or do you think that bridge has been burned?
I would think the bridge will be burned in my mind, honestly. I think that the bridge is burned because, like, you're negotiating with me, it's like we're kind of lining things up to kind of maybe reach a deal, but you go a different direction. Now, probably I can live with it for a year, though, but if you come calling again, I'd probably say no. Because, as you have said, though, that bridge was kind of in a way built for a bit, and then, of course, it gets burnt down. In my mind, it gets burnt down whenever that happens, whether that's with jobs and with sports or with jobs in general. Is you apply for a position somewhere and you're considered. You kind of get to like the final round, though, and it's like, well, we don't want to really, we're going to go a different direction. It's like, well, I'm not going to apply with your company ever again, or at least not apply again, because that bridge in my mind was being built and again got burnt down. So. I catch the drift, though, but I honestly would not do that at this rate and at this point in time. But I think that James is right, though, that I would also hope that Campbell would stay there and kind of help build on the success at Iowa State. With that, Isaiah, one final story for tonight's program that, of course, is brewing in the NBA. It's been brewing for a while, though, but, of course, the James Harden fallout. Harden versus the Rockets saga continues, Isaiah, with, of course, a lot of reports, as mentioned, of James Harden kind of in a way holding out, not coming to camp right away. I believe he did report, though. But like I said, though, Isaiah, that that's also brewing. But as well, though, more trade talks involving James Harden. But however, though, it is James Harden, perhaps, per the rumor mill, Isaiah, going to the Philadelphia 76ers and not the Brooklyn Nets, more so. Isaiah, like I said, though, man, I called this one, like I said, though, earlier on in the offseason. There was something more to this hiring done by Houston, not because of Van Gundy, but because of the hiring of Steven Silas and also Daryl Morey taking that job in Philadelphia. I think is now, ending this Rockets franchise for this season, and probably think is going to set this club back for a while, especially if you deal away James Harden and don't get draft picks or a instant superstar to come to Houston. Isaiah, your thoughts on Harden's holdout and how this saga continues to brew out of control down there in H-Town? What do you got for us?
It is really sad to see what has unraveled, because the Rockets, like just 2 years ago, they had a 3-2 lead on the Golden State Warriors, and they looked primed to beat the Warriors and take down that dynasty and go to the NBA Finals. And here we are less than 2 years later. The Houston Rockets look like a team that they're headed for a rebuild. And I think right now with James Harden holding out, they just traded Russell Westbrook. They got John Wall in that deal for Russell Westbrook. I think the Houston Rockets, they're setting themselves back they're setting themselves back very far, because I would not have traded for John Wall. I mean, John Wall, that contract of his, he's getting like 40 plus million for the next 3 seasons. And also he's coming off a torn Achilles, which is a really big injury for him, because he's a guard that relies on his explosion. So that's going to sap him of his explosion. And you don't know what's going to happen, or you don't know what you're going to see from John Wall post Achilles injury. So I think that contract is probably going to be the worst contract in the NBA. It's going to be very, very hard to move that contract. I don't see you moving that contract at all, because no teams want to take on John Wall at 30 years old, coming off 2 seasons where he didn't play basketball and probably lost a step or two due to the Achilles injury. So you can't move that contract. You don't get a draft. You get like 1 draft pick back for Westbrook, but that's probably going to be in the later rounds, because I think it's the Wizards. They will be good in 2020. Like, they will probably be good in 2022, 2023, and that draft pick is a protected top 20 pick, I believe. So the Rockets most likely will probably be getting 2 second-round picks. And, second-round picks, they're really hit and miss in the NBA draft. You don't really see a lot of second-round picks turning out to be stars. So I think that this is a pivotal trade that the Rockets have to make to rebuild their franchise. James Harden is disgruntled. He wants out. You have to get the best package for him, because if you don't, then your franchise is not going to be relevant for the next 10 years.
Isaiah, there's that big saying though of, I think the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And here, Isaiah, the Rockets have, I think, been for, I'd say the last 10 years, maybe longer, maybe more so recently, have been a very good run franchise. And they've been a very consistent winner, either with division titles or deep playoff runs, but they always fall, they get stopped at the goal line in the conference finals 9 times out of 10. But more so now, as I have said, though, Isaiah, I had a very bad feeling, and it came to fruition with the hiring of Steven Silas, that this was going to break this franchise apart. And now we're seeing the Rockets go through a very painful and slow death right now in Houston, because you've already dealt away Westbrook, you dealt away Capella, you dealt away Chris Paul, and now you are again considering, for the second time in a matter of weeks, considering dealing away your franchise superstar in James Harden. And for one, it's also going to be a deal, though, that's probably going to be very, very lopsided, where it's going to be the player going to Philadelphia, in my mind, and nothing more than cash, maybe a G League player, and maybe a couple of late-round draft picks. And that's going to set, and the Rockets hit that reset button, and they're going to be going back to a very long rebuild. But also, Isaiah, now Isaiah, hypothetically, let's say the draft or the trade does go through. Simmons, Harden, Embiid in Philadelphia, a pretty scary big 3, though. But of course, Isaiah, we know that, of course, Simmons can't shoot the ball very well. Harden does not play defense. Embiid lets his emotions get the best of him. Isaiah, does this big 3, if it in fact does go through with this trade eventually, does it work for Philadelphia? I don't think that Simmons or Embiid sticks around if in fact that Harden is in fact dealt to from Houston to Philadelphia. But what do you think, though, about this potential big 3, though, in Simmons, Embiid, and also with a potential move for James Harden?
Well, Callan, first of all, I don't think the big 3 would work, simply because I don't think there will be a big 3. I think that if you do trade for James Harden, I think Ben Simmons is going to be the guy that the Rockets ask for. I mean, Tillman Fertitta, their owner, has already said publicly that if we're going to trade James Harden, you better give us a young, emerging superstar back. And, Ben Simmons, I think, is a player that they would have to trade, because you're definitely not going to trade Joel Embiid for James Harden. But let's say hypothetically, right, you don't trade Ben Simmons and you're locked in with Simmons, Harden, and Embiid. That's not going to work because Harden needs the ball in his hands to have success. He doesn't play off the ball. And Simmons also needs the ball in his hands to have success. So those two guys will be bumping heads. And also, let's say like Harden, you have Harden run the offense, right? And you have Embiid at the center position, and you have Simmons coming off the ball. That's the problem with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons cannot shoot, so he cannot like play off the ball. Like if he plays off the ball, you're going to get a guy that's going to be bricking 30, 40 times a game. So I don't see this big three working in Philadelphia.
I agree that Simmons is going to be the odd man out, but also that you're talking about if it does stay a big three, though, it's a big three that it's going to be a disaster in my mind. As mentioned, though, Simmons can't shoot. Harden doesn't play defense. And, of course, Embiid becomes a crybaby when things aren't going his way or the team isn't doing great, and he lets his emotions get the best of him. And it would be a dumpster fire that Doc Rivers would not want to put up with in my mind. Plenty of thoughts, Isaiah, about this segment. James first writes in, like I said months ago, Sixers fans would hate the fact that Harden does not play defense, as I had already alluded to here. Christy Wilson writes in, the Rockets are done. James Gonzalez again, Houston wouldn't get much back from Philadelphia for Harden. I thought, and also, I don't know, Isaiah, but what do you think here? James is writing in, I believe that Harden and Embiid had some beef. Did they? I'm not sure.
I don't think they did. I think it was Karl Anthony Towns and Embiid that had some beef, because I remember a couple of years ago they had this massive brawl. I believe it was in Philadelphia, and the brawl didn't just end, it didn't finish it didn't finish after the game had ended. It continued on to the locker room. It continued on to the social media as well. So I don't know about the Embiid Harden beef. I haven't heard anything about it. But James, feel free to put an article or whatever in the comments to help enlighten us about this Embiid Harden beef.
I do know, though, that there was the beef between the Rockets and Clippers, I want to say, where they found the secret tunnel at Staples to go between the locker rooms, I guess, that, of course, that erupted into a pretty big firestorm when the Rockets played the Clippers at Staples Center last season, I believe, or a couple years ago. Also, as well, Christie says that the Sixers would be a bigger hot mess if Harden went there. Again, point alluded to already. And also, James says that this would be Doc Rivers' toughest job to try to get these guys, or these three guys, to play together. But again, folks, still once more, the James Harden saga continues down in Houston with now reports, though, of Harden perhaps being dealt to the Philadelphia 76ers. And also, Christie agrees with us, have not heard about any beef between Embiid and Harden myself either. Again, perhaps it was maybe more so a different situation that probably brewed away from the court that we don't know about, maybe. Because I believe that there's been a lot of stuff that happens, though, too, like in the off season with guys playing in some like the Drew League or whatever that goes on. But some of that stuff does not really come to light, though. But with that, though, folks, we'll now wrap things up for the night and head on over into tonight's final thoughts. Wrapping things up here, folks, on this Tuesday for the night shift in our first program of the week here. Again, folks, back with you on Saturday and on Sunday. One quick update. So James has updated us, Isaiah. He says the beef was just from Embiid and Harden taking cheap shots at one another during a game a couple of seasons ago. So not much banter, but just more so a couple of cheap shots inside, perhaps, done between Embiid and Harden. But still, though, ruffle some feathers for sure there, Isaiah.
Yeah, it did ruffle some feathers, but I wouldn't say that's beef, because that normally happens when you're in a heated battle in basketball.
So again, we'll keep an eye though on that. As mentioned, folks, some potential news here of maybe seeing James Harden heading to Philadelphia. With that, Isaiah, over to you for your final thoughts for tonight's show.
Well, Callan, before I get into my final thoughts, I want to thank the viewers for tuning in tonight. James Gonzalez, Christy Wilson. I want to thank Chris Wilson as well, as also Shardo Gupta. Let's see, Stephen Wang. Stephen, thank you for letting me win, or thank you for the great battle today in fantasy football. But I'm so glad that I, somehow, some way beat you. Dr. Ted Vicky, thank you for tuning in as well. And let's see, I think that's it. But yeah, thank you to all the fans out there for tuning into the show. We would not be nothing without you guys. You guys are truly what makes this program and this network go. So really appreciate you guys. My final thoughts are, first of all, I cannot wait for Thursday to have Grant Cohn come on the show. Me and Grant Cohn agree on so much when it comes to the 49ers. We are two of Nick Mullins' biggest fans, so it will be fun to talk about Nick Mullins with him. It will also be fun to talk about the 49ers with him. I was honestly hoping, Callan, that the 49ers would beat the Bills so I could, bring my bottle of apple cider and also some chips and whatever cookies and whatever food that I had out there on the show that day just to celebrate with Grant Cohn. But unfortunately, the Bills dashed that dream. So now we'll be talking about the end of the 49ers 2020 season. So make sure you guys tune in for that. That's at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, special edition of Wild Sports Talk. So circle your calendars, grab your popcorn, and tune in for that episode. It's going to be an epic show. But my final thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, is I want to talk about some news that I just saw over Twitter, and that is reports are coming in that the New Orleans Pelicans are reportedly interested in acquiring Paul George from the Clippers for Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram. I think that this trade, if it does get done, I think that the Clippers would win this trade in lopsided fashion because right now the Clippers have two big needs. They have one big need, but if they deal away Paul George for Lonzo and Brandon Ingram, like it's being reported, I think Brandon Ingram, number one, would be a better fit for this Clippers team instead of Paul George. Brandon Ingram is a young, an emerging superstar. You will have him for probably the next 5 to 6 years. And then the point, Lonzo Ball. The Clippers need a point guard to help them run the offense. And Lonzo Ball is one of the best passers in the NBA. He will be able to find Kawhi Leonard, find all those shooters that they have with the ball. So I like this trade for the Clippers, but not so much the Pelicans because the Pelicans are a young up-and-coming team. And do you really want to saddle yourself with a toxic crybaby in Paul George?
We'll see how things go with that. As mentioned, some potential rumors here, folks, of maybe seeing Paul George on the move to New Orleans to be with the Pelicans. And again, perhaps two former Lakers going to play for the hallway rivals in the LA Clippers. But again, nothing, of course, at this rate. And James is right. This all comes after George said he wanted to stay a Clipper. Ha, ha, ha. This guy can't find a team to stay with regardless. But again, folks, as a reminder, again, Grant Cohn, the Niners beat writer for SI, and the guy that gave us that beautiful Mike McGlinchey tribute video for his blocking, will join us, folks, on Thursday on WST, a special edition, again, of WST, 5:30 Pacific time. And also, Isaiah, a good friend of mine, kind of in a way good friend of mine, but also a local Bay Area host for you, will also join us the following week after on WST special edition on Thursday.
Yes, sir, Callan. Mark Willard of KNBR, who I believe was a longtime radio host down there in either San Diego or Los Angeles. I might be Yeah, for both. Mark Willard will be joining us next week, Thursday at he'll be joining us at 12:40 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to be a fun show, so make sure you guys circle that on your calendar as well and get ready for another epic show. But Callan, I think we should make Wild Sports Talks on Thursdays as well, because it seems like every single week we're having a special edition of Wild Sports Talk on Thursday. So we might need to come up with something to have Thursdays be for Wild Sports Talk as well as fan response. Maybe we'll do double programming on that day. Who knows?
We'll see. We'll pump the brakes for right now. But as mentioned, folks, Grant Cohn, 49ers reporter for SI, joining us on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. And, of course, Mark Willard from KNBR, former host here on KLSD in San Diego, and also longtime radio host in LA on ESPN 710, will join us 12:40 the following Thursday next week, I should say. Also, folks, to get to day number 9 of the MI6 Sports Network's 31 Days of Hot Takes Challenge, again, folks, we ask you to vote for either Isaiah's hot take of Lonzo Ball being the 4th best point guard in the NBA and better than Kyrie Irving, over the rant that John Alcorn had about the Cowboys that woke his mom. Wow, it's our first shutout. Isaiah wins by unanimous vote with a 3-0 final vote to move on and to kick off the back half of the opening round matchups. And we will, folks, come back with you with our day 10 tomorrow on Wednesday. That will feature, let me check the bracket here real quick to see where we're at. Tomorrow, folks, will feature our buddy Furman Lee, Isaiah, declaring the Raiders would win the AFC West Division title a couple of weeks ago against me, perfectly and accurately predicting the Dolphins would beat your beloved 49ers and the Lakers would win the NBA title in game number 6 against the Miami Heat. So that is what the matchup will be come day 10 on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. It's on Wednesday, not when we have Grant Cohn on the show. So we don't have to tell him about me canceling the season after week 4. So thank you.
No, on Thursday, it'll be Trevor saying Devin Booker to Orlando against me in my infamous shades on Thursday with Grant Cohn. So you're out of the woods for right now. I don't know about Willard's episode, but you're out of the woods for right now. So we'll see how things are going. With that in mind, though, folks, as we wrap things up for the night, for Isaiah Leung and the entire cast and crew here from the MI6 Sports Network, yours truly, Cal McClurg, saying goodnight, folks. We'll see you back here on Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, for another edition of Wild Sports Talk, folks, with myself, Isaiah, and John Mathis. And as a reminder, Grant Cohn, Niners beat writer and reporter for SI, will join us on Thursday at 5:30 on Thursday. With that, folks, take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. So long, sayonara, farewell. We are out of here. Till tomorrow, folks. Good night. Bye-bye.